Go 5 seconds. You're listening to Spurscast, episode 576. My name is Paul Garcia, and I am your host here on the Spurscast. Today, I'll be joined by my colleagues Benjamin Bornstein and Collin Reid. This episode will be a continuation of our Spurs Twitter questions sent a few weeks back. So, welcome, guys. Let's go ahead and get started here. Ben, how are you doing today?
I am great, sir. How are you doing?
Doing well. Collin, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Just hanging out during this time, sheltering at home, but doing well.
Good to hear that everybody's doing well. Okay, guys, so we're finally almost at the end of this journey. A few weeks back, I had asked people that follow me on Twitter to send me some questions, and there was a lot of questions sent enough to where that we've actually had to split this into 3 different episodes because there's so many questions. So we're finally toward the end here. We're at our final 3 questions from Twitter, so we're going to go ahead and answer those. And then at the end of the episode, I asked you all to send us Project Spurs staff, and so you guys have provided some questions we're going to go through too. Okay, so let's begin with our first question. It's a little bit negative here, but the fans want it, so let's go ahead and discuss it. Question number 1: is the lackluster team performance this season due to bad coaching or poor player performance? Collin, I'll give you the first answer there.
Right. So I think, a lot of people had questions about the rotation and kind of what was going on with that. More than anything, though, maybe sometimes the rotations were spotty. Sometimes maybe players played worse than we expected them to play. But I think that at the end of the day, really what it was the roster, which I think has overperformed for the past 2 years, partially because of really good coaching. I think when you look at this roster, you could see all of the problems that ended up happening being there. I was listening to a podcast before the season by Ben Taylor and Danny LaRue, and they were talking about candidates they thought would get better or worse throughout the season. And so I did that exercise with the Spurs, and I was like, okay, who's going to get better or worse this season? And I realized there was a lot of players who were on like that older downward decline of their career. And I was like, oh no, like this could be a problem if the wrong players take a step back at the wrong time. And I don't think any players took like a crazy unexpected step back. I just think it was that time has gone on and players are getting older, and DeJounte is coming back from an injury that takes a long time to come back from. And what's kind of unfortunate is right before everything stopped, we saw several good games of him in a row where it's like, okay, he's really getting back into form and you can tell he's feeling comfortable and he's really all the way back from that injury. But unfortunately the season stopped when it did. And I think it's more a roster than anything, to be honest. Okay,
Ben, your answer for that question?
I really like Collin's answer. Can I steal it? I love that you thought to do kind of that, thinking through the roster at the beginning of the year, kind of who's due for a down season. And, if you go back to the beginning of the season, you do look at it. And like Collin said, there are some over 30 guys or guys who are approaching that plateau and then decline age. And it showed. And I think LaMarcus Aldridge took a step back a bit this year at times. And a lot of that was injuries. He didn't play as many games as he probably wanted to. I think DeMar DeRozan did a lot of really nice things, but I think there were aspects of his game where he took a step back because he was asked to do a lot more than he should have been. And part of that was DeJounte Murray trying to get his feet back under him. Part of that was the rotations and certain guys not getting the minutes at point guard that they need or not getting the shooting guard that they need. And really, I thought a lot of it was Bryn Forbes got way too many minutes in the rotation this year. I mean, you can point to, there's probably a handful of games, there's probably 10 or 15 games where you're saying, well, if Bryn Forbes doesn't play in that game or if he's not playing as many minutes that game, the Spurs aren't in it like they were. They don't win the game. And yeah, I get that. But there were a couple of times, well, more than a couple of times, I would argue there were probably the same amount of games where you look at that game when you're watching it and you say, wow, Bryn Forbes being in for as long as he was cost the Spurs that game. And so there's players up and down. Players were up and down because the roster was inconsistent, or the rotation was inconsistent, like Collin mentioned. So I think that was really, it was kind of cyclical, or it was kind of, one thing leads to another, and it's a big circle, and it keeps happening. I'm unhappy because I'm fat. I eat because I'm unhappy, and I'm unhappy because I eat. The Austin Powers thing. But it was like that with the Spurs this year, where it was, Lonnie Walker has a game where he goes off and he has a great game and he's playing 20 plus minutes, and then the next game he comes back and only plays 5 minutes, and you wonder what just happened. And then there are games where Bryn Forbes will have a great game and he'll play 20 plus minutes or however many it is, and then he'll have a great game, and then the next game he only comes back and he's only playing 10 minutes, and you're wondering, where is the reward in this rotation system?
Okay, so my answers are kind of like a mixture of both of y'all's. I would as well put the majority of this responsibility on the players, because they're the ones who are actually out there playing the game. So I'd say if I had to divide it into percentage, I'd say like 20 or 30% coaching, and then the rest of it is players, player performance. Ben, you kind of talked about one of the main issues that I had this whole year was the fact that Bryn Forbes was playing a lot of minutes, or just different lineups that weren't just defensive focused type lineups. I mean, like if you look at Cleaning the Glasses possessions data, DeJounte Murray and Bryn Forbes played 2,092 total possessions together this season so far, as of where it ended. And Derek White and DeJounte only played 198 possessions. Think about that. 800 less. I mean, 1,800 less possessions for two of your what you would call your better defender, your better defensive players. And so, and we don't know if it would have worked with DeJounte and Derek, had they played together. I know that from the small sample of evidence that we have, it is a bad number. It's a minus 12.7 points per 100. The data with Bryn is at a -8. But again, they only played, that's less than 200 possessions that they were on the court together. And it's not just about Bryn. I know that he takes a lot of the blame, but also just having lineups. There was several lineups at the time when there was DeRozan and Bryn. There was DeRozan and Bellinelli, Bryn and Bellinelli. It's just the fact that like you weren't putting forth the rotations just weren't sound, especially just to try to do the best you could defensively. And I remember at one time, one of the Express News reporters, I believe it was, asked Coach Pop, the question of like, if you have you ever been tried like just putting multiple good your best defenders on the court, and I forgot the answer, but it basically sounded like they weren't going to try that, and they obviously never did, for a good sample size. And I think that's their main issue, the fact that they were 24th defensively as of where the year ended, according to Cleaning the Glass. Offensively, we saw that offense, that system took a turn this past year, where it finished off at 11th as of the time that the season ended so far. And that's more on the player personnel part. The fact, Coach Pop can't force DeMar DeRozan to take threes, and LaMarcus Aldridge to stop taking mid range, even though he did go to the 3-point line. He can't force DeJounte Murray to only take threes. He's barely developing his jumper. So a lot of that part on the offense, I do say that's more so the players. The fact that they were 30th in getting to the rim, 28th in 3-point attempts, and then they were first in mid range. And we know that in 2020, that offense does not work in the NBA. So I say that the majority of it would probably have to be on the players. And just like Collin mentioned, the roster that they put together, it was we saw that last year they barely got in without DeJounte there in the 7th seed when they played Denver. It took them to 7 games. So it is what it is. And so I don't think that the season will come back. So we'll go ahead and see what happens from here on out. All right, let's go to our second question that the fans asked. It was, how can they turn this around next season? What should the Spurs' very first step come the off season? What should be the Spurs' very first step come the off season? Ben, you go ahead and take that one first.
Get people in the gym shooting threes. I mean, you can say it's the players all you want, but you also have to come up with a game plan that allows your players to shoot those threes. And I think a lot of it's going to be dependent on do the Spurs keep DeMar DeRozan around, or does DeMar DeRozan opt in for the last year of his contract? If he doesn't, it gives the Spurs the opportunity to go out and find someone in free agency, albeit really just a stopgap player, because they're not going to have a lot of salary cap space until next summer when more contracts are freed up. But, I think you have to really start playing. They have to start playing the style of basketball that is not from 1999. I mean, there's nothing wrong with getting into the mid-range and shooting mid-range every now and then. You need that mid-range to open up other parts of the game. I understand that. I get it. But you can't rely almost exclusively on it. Like you said, it was 30th in the league or it was 28th in the league in 3-point attempts.
Yes. Frequency of shots from three.
As a team that wants to compete in the NBA and get to a playoff, you can't be 28th in the league and still have to do the cost benefit analysis there. And you have to say, well, if we're hitting at such a high rate, why don't we take more? And yes, your shooting percentage is probably going to take a bit of a dip or a dive if you're shooting way more threes. But at the same time, you have to take that risk because really, as long as you're hitting somewhere in the range of 34 to 38% from three as a team, I think the biggest thing for the Spurs this offseason is, give more guys the green light and find guys who are going to be able to shoot the three and really find guys who are willing to defend. Because there comes a time when DeMar DeRozan has just decided I'm doing everything on offense, but I really don't care to do anything on defense. And a little bit of that is with LaMarcus Aldridge as well. He says, I'll bang with the bigger guys who don't really require too much defense. I'll guard a Rudy Gobert who is limited offensively. But other than that, I'm not really moving my feet with other big men who are fast.
Okay. Collin, what's your answer to that question?
Yeah, it's tough because I don't know what turn this around actually means. So if we're looking at the teams that are in the playoffs picture for the West right now, we have the Lakers. They're not going to drop out next year unless there's an injury. Clippers aren't either. The Nuggets aren't either. The Jazz probably won't. The Rockets won't. The Mavs won't. The Thunder may. The Grizz and the Pelicans are on the way up. The Warriors are going to be back in there. Portland, if they have a healthier season, are probably going to be right there in the mix. And the Suns and Kings, they were frisky this year. They might be just one step or one development away from fighting for the playoffs. And the Timberwolves have a player like Towns. They could always be in there. Well, I just named 14 teams, and the Spurs makes 15. So you could argue for any team in the West to make the playoffs. Like, the playoffs are going to be so competitive in the West next year. And for the Spurs to just try to make the 8th seed again or the 7th seed again just to lose to the Lakers or Clippers in the first round, I don't think sounds all that appealing. So to me, like, turning this around is maybe like having a conversation with DeMar and LaMarcus and saying like, hey, we're going to go to a youth movement. We're going to rebuild. If you like it here, you're welcome to stay. We are going to give the ball more to the young guys. But if y'all want to be moved to a place where y'all are going to get more time and y'all are going to be utilized better at the end of y'all's career, we're happy to accommodate y'all. And then start rolling out the youth lineups more, or if you keep LaMarcus or DeMar both, still have it be more centered around the young guys and develop. I think that's the best next step, and I think that's turning it around. And that might not get them in the playoffs next year, but I think it has the best scenario for like 4 or 5 years down the road in terms of how the team will look. So for me, I think it's time to take a step back and maybe rebuild a little bit for the sake of the long-term future.
Yeah. Okay. So I took the question as like trying to get it back in the playoffs, which I don't quite agree with that. I'm kind of like you, Collin, where I think that the best approach is to kind of just go to a more focused decision on building up your youth. But I think that for this question, they're asking, I guess, to get them back into the playoff picture. And so I guess the only way to do that, I would say, is just break up the 2 stars. We've seen that it doesn't work. I would like to see what a lot of those young guys built around LaMarcus Aldridge looks like, because Aldridge, like I said, he's playing more of the modern version of basketball, where he's going out to the 3-point line, spacing out for you. Still takes some mid-range, but again, he can also get you some buckets in the low post. I think that's a little bit more adaptable, and maybe that way you're giving the ball more times in pick and roll to like DeJounte Murray, to Derek White, to Lonnie Walker, those young players, and see what they really have. And so obviously that would have to be with either letting DeRozan walk in free agency, or trying to either trade him or do a sign and trade if he wants to go through that route. So I just don't think that with a group built around DeRozan and Aldridge is not going to work anymore. We can tell based on this data from this year that it's just not going to get you into the playoffs. Kind of going back to our previous answers, playing more defensive first players, kind of what we mentioned earlier, playing a lot of the guys who have more upside defensively, even if your offense takes a bit of a hit. And then maybe even, like I said, change it by moving one of those players to 2 stars. You are going to affect have an impact on the offensive philosophy, because you're going to be losing one of those mid-range go-to players. So you will there will be an impact there where maybe threes are taken, or maybe attempts at the rim get improved. And then you just got to try your best to get to defensively 10th or 15th if you want to try to get into the playoff picture. But I agree with Collin. I mean, I just think that the road with this group that they have right now is really tough, and I don't think that there's a signing in free agency with the MLE that's really going to boost that, make them jump over all those teams that Collin was mentioning there, and also kind of what Ben was saying. So yeah. So I mean, I for that answer, that's kind of how the best that I can answer it. But again, I just think that they should look forward to giving the young guys the keys next year. Question number 3 from the fans on Twitter was suggestion. Really, give us your top 10. Give us your guys' top 10 players of all time, top 10 power forwards and onwards. So I don't know who wants to start with this. I didn't actually. I kind of cheated here. I didn't really get a full top 10, but I'll explain my answer when I get to mine. Let's go ahead and start with Collin here. However you want to address this question.
Okay, so I'm changing the rules a little bit. I'm sorry to whoever asked the question, but if I talked about best 10 players of all time, all I'm going to be doing is regurgitating what someone else said. So
Yeah.
A little confession. I've only really been watching basketball since 2012. So this is the best players, the top 10 players in the NBA since 2012, which unfortunately means no big 3 Spurs because they were all post-prime or retired for most of this. So number 1 best player since 2012, I'm going to go with Boris Diaw. Just kidding. LeBron James is definitely number 1. I had a really hard time with number 2 and number 3. Man, I really wanted to put Steph 2, but I feel like I have to go KD 2. And then I had Steph 3, Kawhi 4, Harden 5, Westbrook, Giannis. I wanted to put Giannis way higher, but he's just been doing it for such a shorter time compared to those other guys. Then 8, I had CP3. And then 9 and 10 was so hard because there were so many candidates, but I ended up rounding it out with AD and Lillard. So that was the best 10 players in the past 8 years, which was a really fun experiment. But if you asked me to give you your best 10 players, it would just be someone else's list. So.
Yeah. Okay. Mine's kind of close to it's similar in a way that I really crunched mine down as well. Ben, go ahead and take your answer for that question.
So I don't have a 10. I don't have enough time to get into top 10 of each position, but I have kind of my top 10 team of guys I would love to play with. John Stockton. This is no particular order. It's Bill Russell, John Stockton, Tim Duncan, Hakeem Olajuwon. That's 4. I have to keep track. I can't. I'm bad with math. David Robinson. Oh, hold on. I have my list right here. Here we go. And Kareem, Larry Bird. Larry's my guy. I think that's 6. Dr. J, I love watching his highlights. I will go and watch his highlights all day, every day. Scottie Pippen, one of the most selfless dudes and, frankly, underappreciated guys. And I know that's been a lot of people saying that because of the Last Dance documentary going on, but I think we're going to find that he's even more underappreciated after all of this. Shaq, because you need a lighthearted guy in the locker room to keep things light. And frankly, he was just so dominant. I would love to watch him just beat the absolute bejesus out of Sean Bradley every single night if I could, because that is never not hilarious to me. And then, even though he broke my heart in 2013, Ray Allen.
Oh yes, okay, he's on my list of players. So, okay, so yeah, like you guys, I didn't. It's just my basketball knowledge as well does not go back that far in time. I'd say like the early 2000s when I'd say that obviously in the 90s I watched basketball as a kid and I was paying attention to it, but I wasn't understanding it at the level that where the fact that I was reading newspaper articles on it or I was actually looking at box scores. I didn't start doing that stuff till the early 2000s when newspaper come out after a game and then I actually read the article or the recap and then look at the box scores and stuff like that. And then later on, obviously getting into more stats based. So like you guys, a lot of my knowledge there does not go back that far when I really did watch these players or understand exactly what they were doing, how good they were in their primes. So just for the top 10 players of all time that I can just think of, I just wrote down 10 players, and this is no one in no order because I don't want to have Kobe fans going after LeBron fans or that kind of stuff, Jordan fans. So I would just say Michael Jordan, Tim Duncan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James is in there, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Russell, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Shaq, and then the last one I had trouble with, I put Wilt Chamberlain. I just again I didn't watch a lot of Wilt Chamberlain, so it's just kind of looking up stats and just looking up different things. So that's kind of if I could put 10 players. Now I did have 2 players that I would say that who were 2 players that I actually from when I was just playing basketball a lot. That have really influenced the way I play my game and play basketball, should I say, and also it just really influenced me. Like I just stay up hours watching these players' videos and just trying to see if I get my shot down like theirs. And there's two players. I first went through like a one-on-one Kobe phase where like I wanted to play like Kobe, kind of doing fadeaway jumpers all the time and just studying all his game film and constantly watching. That was early on in college, and I was watching a lot of Kobe film. And then the second player is the one that Ben mentioned, Ray Allen, just because that's where my whenever I play basketball, I like to shoot more threes and just be more of a spacer kind of person. And so Ray Allen is that player for me, where I just constantly watching his videos. I remember in the finals when the Heat were coming to San Antonio, and I go the one player I'd always go out and watch before in warmups is Ray Allen. And I stopped some videos from those years in the finals, and just watching his form, every single drill that he did just to get started. I'd obviously watch on YouTube in the past when he was like with the Sonics and other teams. So Ray Allen's been a huge influence on me in terms of how I play basketball, and even though obviously Spurs fans don't like him because of what he did in 2013, he's a huge influence on me. So yeah, that's kind of where my answer's at on that question as well. So we all kind of modified that question, or changed it up a little bit. All right, guys. So we finally completed the Spurs Twitter questions. So again, thank you all for those of you that sent me those questions over the last few weeks. And we compiled them again. If you want to listen to the old answers, go back to the episode 1 and then episode 2, and then this will be episode 3. Now we're going to finish up this episode by going through 2 of our questions from our staff. The first question one of our writers put is, what's been the biggest disconnect between fans' opinion on who the Spurs should take and people making mock drafts? Okay, so I do want to say before I hand this off for the first answer, I kind of see where this person's coming from, because, Draft Express, I checked their latest mocks on April 8th. They have the Spurs with the 12th pick taking Tyrese Maxey, who's about 6'3", 6'1", 6'1 to 6'3 is what they have as his height. So you're right, that's a point guard / shooting guard from Kentucky. And then even like the Ringer on their latest mock on April 15th, I believe that is, they had Cole Anthony with the 12th pick at 6'3" player, and then Obi Toppin is at 11. So if the Spurs got 11, they would have him at 6'9", so he's a bigger player. So Ben, I'll let you go to take this question first.
So that was my question, for the record. But
okay.
The few mocks that I've seen have had R.J. Hampton at 11, who is a 6'5" guard.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these mock drafts have the Spurs taking guards, which I think is ridiculous, because they have enough guards. Even if DeMar DeRozan leaves this summer, they have enough guys in the bank that they'll be fine. And if really they're going to go for the full rebuild, they're even more fine, because then you have an excuse to bring up Keldon Johnson and let him play a ton of minutes. So for me, they need to seriously address an issue with their forwards going into the future, even if we're assuming Lucas Samanic is the guy who's going to come up and be good. Because it looks like at this point, Chimezie Metu is not going to be that guy. He's had opportunities to come up, and for whatever reason, the staff just hasn't brought him up as much as I think they should have and given him a good, serious look. So you have to consider that, with the fact that Aldridge will be out of town at some, in the near future. You have to replace him, and you have to bring in someone who's going to play defense, who's a versatile defender. And a guy like Obi Toppin is perfect at 11 if he falls there. That's the other problem. I've seen plenty of mock drafts where he does not fall to them. He gets drafted in like the first 8 picks, which is a super bummer. This is the thing that keeps me up at night. A lot of fans feel like this don't need, but for whatever reason, everybody who's making mock drafts thinks the Spurs need guards. And so I don't understand why there's such a disconnect between people who watch the team and then people who just decide, I'm making this mock draft. Not all mock drafts are made with team considerations in mind, or really their history of drafting in mind, because a lot of people will just say, oh, well, the Spurs will take best available, rather than, well, Spurs might actually just take the best fit, or they'll take a position of need. And in this draft, really only the top 5 players you can afford to say, we're going to take best available. After that, it's really go get the guy who grades out for you at that position that you need.
Okay, interesting. Collin, what's your answer to that question?
Yeah, so I don't think And then I'm in lockstep agreement with the Spurs front office here. You can't have enough 6'5" guards, and I think they should just go all in on 6'5" guards. And just kidding, they already have like 8 of them. So no, I agree. I think a big man is definitely, especially for exactly the reasons Ben said of like we don't know where Aldridge is going to be, and the Spurs will probably try to keep Pirtle, but who knows what's going to happen with that. Their big man rotation is probably the less certain of a lot of their rotations going forward. And I also think, and I know there really aren't projected to be any like super duper stars in this draft, especially available where the Spurs would be picking. But it seems like wing is the most important position in today's NBA. So, I mean, really, wing or big, I would be pretty happy with either. Another guard would be an interesting choice, I think.
Yeah, and one thing I will say is like for something that Draft Express did this year that they haven't done in the past that I've seen is they they put the best player that they want to that they mock the Spurs to take, but they added a new little feature where it says a best fit, and they actually put Isaac Okoro there. So according to and Ben, is he more of what would Okoro do? I know you mentioned him before.
He's kind of a 2 or 3. He's 6'6", but he's very solidly built. He's like 6'6", 220. He's a freshman. He's very strong. He can play defense at the NBA level, but his offense is behind him right now. That's the part of him that has to catch up.
Okay, yeah. So they did add that where they put a best fit on there as well. So we'll see again. Like I think like what Ben said, where these mocks are just kind of looking at best available next player on the board that's up regardless of position. Whereas I agree with you guys. I think the Spurs need a bigger wing, like 6'7" to 6'9" range, or a big somebody else for the future. All right, let's go to our last question from one of our staff members. It is, what is the median or most likely outcome for a core of DeJounte Murray, Derek White, Keldon Johnson, Lonnie Walker IV, and Jakob Poeltl on defense once the incumbent stars are gone? Top 10 in the league, top 5. Basically, what is their defensive potential down the road once these younger guys are your core part of the team? Collin, go ahead and take that answer first.
So it feels ambitious to say, especially since a lot of these players aren't in their prime yet, it feels ambitious to say top 5. But I was trying to sit there and think, like, what if all these players were playing at once? Like, what's their big weakness on defense? And really, they don't have a lot. They could play with Pirtle the drop style that the Bucks play to much success. I think their one problem would be a big and strong wing, which, heads up, is like every team's problem in the NBA. Like Kawhi and LeBron is just going to run like strong offense against any team. But during the regular season, they're not going to be playing teams with a player like that a lot of the times. And even when they are, those players aren't going to be using the offensive possessions every time either. So it's very hard because it's like, man, this offensive or this defensive group doesn't look like it has a ton of weaknesses. So I'm going to say top 10 to be safe because it's hard to project a bunch of people that are in their prime to be top 5. But I definitely think like if this is the Spurs core for the next 6 or 7 years, they would be like right around top 5, like above or below it for that whole time.
Okay. Ben, what's your answer for this question?
I think median, or their most likely outcome is definitely somewhere in the top 10 in this league. It's just like Collin said, where is your biggest weakness? Yeah, it's probably at if one of these guys has to guard a big, strong forward, yeah, that's where you're going to get killed. But that's really the issue. And like he also said, that's really the issue with a lot of other teams where other teams struggle. So it really comes down to, do you have the right people helping you? Do you have quick enough and smart enough athletes and players to cover that space that you're inevitably going to lose off this forward who's either blowing by someone or they're muscling their way past someone else? Is Poeltl quick enough to recognize it, step up, and deter the shot or block it or whatever it may be? And I think the answer right now is yes. Honestly, probably the closest one being there right now. So I don't think top 10 is out of the question. And I think at the very worst, they're in the middle of the league. So I would say, that's a pretty good core for you right now. And I think what's going to come down to is finding a couple other specialists, because it's not even only about the defense. A lot of you're playing great, breaks down you if you don't have an offense that will help you out either. It's almost like that argument in football, like, oh, that team's not a good defensive team because, their offense turns the ball over a lot. The other team has short fields, and so the defense gets scored on, even though it's not really their fault. So I think there's a little bit of offense that has to be considered there too, where, there's not going to be a lot of turnovers. There's not going to be a lot of fast break points and opportunities. So I think that's going to be a key factor in how the defense looks for this core.
Okay, so I'd agree with both y'all. I think that, just with these players, if this is really how a core group is built, I really think that they can easily just be 11th through 15th in that range. I think to get to a top 10 or even top 5 level, they do need there's two models. There's the model, like you guys mentioned, of having those elite defensive players, and right now they don't have that on their team. They don't have, like, you think of Milwaukee, like a player like Giannis, or the Clippers, a player like Kawhi. Toronto, player like Pascal Siakam, et cetera. Philly, Ben Simmons, and Joel Embiid. They don't have that elite player yet on their team. DeJounte can be really good, but again, it's at the 1. So I think that definitely 11th through 15th range. But there's teams in there. I was looking at the top 10 right now currently, and there's teams in there who don't have that dominant defensive player. They have good defensive players and a system that's really good with good athletes. And so there's that ability for the Spurs to get into the top 10 with this type of group there. So I still think, though, that down the road, into the future, they got to get that position that you guys mentioned, the player that everybody's coveting, which is that 6'8" to like 6'10" type of wing, who can guard Kawhi, who can guard LeBron, those kind of players, Kevin Durant, et cetera. So I think that there's a bright spot for this group, defensively, in the future. Again, how long will that be? It obviously depends what the question said is how long, are the core players like DeRozan, Aldridge, Rudy Gay, those kind of players going to be on the roster? How long are they going to be with the team? So, okay, so we'll basically, before we end this episode, I do want to remind you all to visit ProjectSpurs.com. Here's the latest on the site. We have Ben with another prospect watch. And Ben, did you want to say anything? I know you mentioned RJ Hampton earlier. Did you want to say anything about your article that came out this week?
Yeah, so this week is RJ Hampton. I'm actually going to write up an article next week about, why he's actually not, why I don't think he's the right pick at 11 for the Spurs, where a lot of mock drafts have him going. So we're gonna, I'm gonna explore that. I talk about RJ Hampton this week. What's good, what's not good, what he's got to work on, what he could contribute immediately. So I think, if you're still ramping up for draft season, check it out.
And Ben, I had this question. This is kind of off topic, but since you've covered you follow the draft so closely, has there been any word yet if it's looking like we're going to continue to have it in June, or is it looking like it's going to be something where it comes later on in the fall? What have you heard about the draft?
The only thing I've heard them talking about moving it back.
Yeah.
If there's going to be, well, I think they're going to move it back regardless. But last thing I heard was something about moving it to May if they can continue the season and actually finish it. Other than that, I really don't know. I don't know when they would start it, when they would do it, and I think if they do it, there's likely to be no summer league, or if there is a summer league, it's heavily truncated, and so you're going to have to get a lot of games in very quickly. So I'm not really sure how they do that. Even if they go to Vegas and they have the 2 venues, they may need to find another one. So I'm curious to see how that all works out. But I think the draft.
Well, and one more thing that I actually heard on the Duncan and Hollinger show they were talking about is the transaction piece of this, because so many teams make trades, and you can't make trades until after the season is over, after the trade deadline. So if it was going to be in June, it would have to be because the season is canceled. Just because you can't trade players that are going to be on playoff rosters for draft picks, that would be pretty wild.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be either after the season is over if they decide to keep it, or if it is going to be in June, it's because they canceled the season.
Okay, yeah. So I'm glad you guys clarified that a little bit because that's kind of where I'm I'm a little I see that a lot of the basketball mock draft people and stuff like that, they're getting into the draft as if it's approaching here in June, or like the lottery's coming up in May. But again, like we don't know exactly what's going to happen, and I don't know how they're making these moves. And I watched Commissioner Silver had a press briefing with the press, I think it was last week, and he basically said that they really had, there's no, like, he doesn't want to put it in stone anything yet as far as what's going to happen with the league, what the next decisions are. So that's why I'm kind of like curious, because for me, I'm still taking it very like basketball, and even like transitions, draft, it's still going to be in the fall, in my opinion, or even like maybe you get the playoffs in the summer, July at best, and then they start all this stuff in August or September. That's kind of where I keep seeing it. But I don't know, again, like we just haven't got any clarity. But I do, like I said, the reason why I would ask you guys this is because, again, I've seen that so a lot of the basketball writers are actually continuing to go into that mode of like, oh, draft's coming up soon, and next month or the month after. So that's why I'm kind of curious if you guys have seen anything or heard anything elsewhere. Just because it's so much up in the air, and so if it is coming fast and it's going to be in June, then I need to get more on the ball and be more aggressive in terms of starting to research picks and stuff like that. I mean, prospects and stuff. So we'll see. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen. It's obviously a week-to-week basis in terms of where this is headed. Thank you guys for joining me on this Spurscast episode 576. As always, before we end this episode, I want to send out a thank you to Michael DeLeon for mixing and producing this episode for us. So from our whole team over at Project Spurs, we want you all to stay safe and take care. Thank you.